Deputy Speaker, and I don't want to repeat many of the excellent points that were made from the shadow front bench and that have already been made in the House, but I just want to make one observation and 2 points, one legal technical on clause 6 and one more substantial on clause 9. But first, my observation, and I'm sorry, I disagree with the member for Newark who's just spoken. What is proposed in this bill is unprecedented, and you can see that from the reaction on both sides of the House. And there is an absurdity in this debate. I spent much of the time during the EU referendum debating against those campaigning to leave on the other side of the House. And the central core of their argument, more often than not, was the fact that there was this Brussels elite which was exercising all this power. And now I've sat in this chamber for most of today and listened to them become the arch advocates of transferring power to another elite in this country. It's a shame, actually, the member for Chingford, who was here earlier, talked about his participation in the Maastricht debates of the 1990s. I think the member for Harwich also was part of that, as was the member for Stone. And I think the Prime Minister of the time had a word to describe them all, which I won't repeat today. But they constantly were invoking parliamentary sovereignty, the importance of this House determining the future of our nation. And it's funny how silent they are when it comes to upholding that argument, and have been over the last few hours of this debate. And let's be honest about the reason for it, and the reason for this absurdity of their position on this debate. They promised Brexit in terms which simply cannot be delivered in the time frame that the government envisages. And that's why you see these unprecedented, extraordinary powers envisaged in this bill for the executive. And I think it is entirely right for us to keep reminding people what the promises were and whether they are being delivered. My technical point on clause 6, I won't give way, I'm afraid, because of the time. The Secretary of State... OK, you're not silent. The member says he's not silent. The Secretary of State... He's certainly not silent, actually. The Secretary of State today said that the government wishes for transitional arrangements to be as close as possible to the existing arrangements. And let's be clear that the EU 27 are really only going to entertain membership of the single market and a form of customs union, if that is what the Secretary of State means. But they will also expect that the rules that apply to the transitional arrangements should be uniform and similar to the ones that we have at the moment. And the problem with Article 6 as it is drafted is that it does not give a clear enough instruction to the judiciary that when they are interpreting UK law after the exit date, they should do so in a way that complies with EU law insofar as transition is concerned. And this is a point that the Institute for Government have made. They say that the ambiguity on this point would risk leaving judges stranded on the front line of a fierce political battle. And I can just say, as someone who practices a lawyer for the best part of a decade before coming here, it's got to be addressed. My last, more substantial point is this. This bill cannot be allowed to come into force unless this House has approved the deal that is envisaged. This bill doesn't state whether any withdrawal agreement will need to be consented to by both houses before the powers in this bill can be used. Now, the government has said that we will get a vote on a final deal. But that does not appear to be within legislation. It will be by means of a motion. And, of course, that is not legally binding. So we've got the promise of a vote, but it's got no teeth. And it deprives this House of having its proper say, not just on any withdrawal agreement, but on the situation which has been talked about by the Prime Minister, where there's an affirmative decision made to walk away with no deal at all. And somehow we're supposed to be passive spectators in that situation. It has got to be written on the face of this bill that Parliament will have a part to play on all those scenarios, and that no powers under this bill will be exercised until Parliament has had its say through a debate written in statute. I'll just finish by saying this. We've been given many guarantees and assurances by the front bench here. It has to be on the face of the bill. And in asking for these assurances and scrutinising this bill, we do so in the national interest and are entitled to do so without our motives being questioned.